Hi, welcome to another edition of uh, another live stream edition of our show Space Alert by the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. The Global Network was created in 1992 to prevent the arms race from moving into space. You can support the show by hitting the like button and the subscribing and the subscribe button as well. And also be sure to check out our website at spaceforpeace.org. We want to thank Global Network board member Will Griffin for doing all the tech work to make this show possible. Our guest this time is Rachel Clark from upstate New York. She's a Japanese language interpreter, translator, as well as a peace activist and coordinator of many Veterans for Peace delegations and speaking tours to Japan. Actually, one of those is coming up soon in early December that she'll be organizing. So, welcome to the show, Rachel.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Glad to have you. Let's start out with 2015. That year, you helped organize and lead a VFP delegation that I
Mhm.
was on to Okinawa.
Yeah.
Could you talk about why that trip was so important, both for the Americans from Veterans for Peace and for the Okinawan people?
Wow. Okay. That's so heavy from the very beginning. Bruce, to get to the point, please allow me to start from South Korea. You and some of the delegations visited Jeju Island in South Korea before you joined me in Okinawa, right? Yeah. So that place at that time, still the U.S. naval base construction was going on. So you guys were eyewitnesses of the massive destruction. How much they were, although they were constructing base, but at the same time they were just destroying the pristine natural beauty of the ocean and also biodiversity. You know, that whole place was on what you call it, a World Heritage level of uh, untouched beauty preserved, but the U.S. military base construction was destroying completely. So that's very devastating. And you remember a long time ago, you told me that naval base in Jeju Island and the Henoko's U.S. Marine Air Base were twin sisters aiming at China. Is that true, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So a few years later, I visited Jeju Island myself, and I was standing up in front of the completed base, which was heartbreaking. And at that moment, that experience gave me foreseeable future of Okinawa. Yeah, it was very, very shocking. So, like you told me, yeah, that was the twin sisters. And thinking back the last 8, 9 years, I see that these base constructions were, you know, going on, and it was going parallel to the U.S. government's meddling Ukrainian government, right? So you can see that uh, our country is meddling uh, internal matters of the other countries, of the other on the other side of the world going on. So let's see. You also know that our common friends, as one of the sons of our common friend, was deployed to Ukraine since what, 2013, right? As military personnel, training locally military to the level of NATO interoperability, right?
Yeah.
So, what has been unfolding and escalating over Russia and China since this year's Beijing Olympic Games looks to me like neither Biden nor Trump planned this. It must have been planned long time ago, even decades long. When you think of the long history of Okinawa's struggle with Futema Air Base's relocation plan, you could also say that this was a long span of planning. Therefore, it is crucial for us Americans to understand that our elected officials are not helping to develop peaceful diplomacy with both China and Russia, unfortunately. We are rather manipulating and controlling local matters on the other side of the world, as I said before. For Okinawans who have been treated as subservient, both mainland Japan and the US, I feel deeply, deeply sorry. As US citizen and a native of Japan, after that delegation trip to Okinawa and visited more than 55 countries of the world so far, and attending the first international conference against US/NATO bases, which took place in Dublin, 2018, I see that it is crucial for Okinawans to develop a firm and long-lasting coalition with small communities in the world who are hosting US-NATO bases, because the common issues derive from the fact that they are hosting those bases. If not, offering their civilian facilities to US military or NATO military, like, for example, Shannon Airport in Ireland, right? I hope I answered your question. Did I?
Another question.
Thanks.
During the Obama administration, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton promoted the pivot to Asia Pacific. What was the goal of this military expansion? What have been the results of it so far?
I think that their goal was to maintain and spread US hegemony and to suppress China's economic influence, which has been rapidly spreading across the world, right? And behind this goal, there seems to be the necessity to keep feeding each branch of US forces. In other words, the Pentagon tries to meet the appetite of the defense industry, which keeps feeding our Pentagon wants to feed defense industry. The defense industry feeds our elected representative, intelligence, media, academia, and think tank. So, like who said that was Ray McGovern, who said all together as a Mickey Mat. So if you see this historic shift, let's see, the change from East versus West to West versus Middle East, which translates that it was a shift from Cold War to war and terror, right? Can be also said that it was a shift from big, quiet spending on nuclear weapons to more visible spending on each branch of Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and the newly added Department of Homeland Security. This shift was realized by 9/11, right? Like many veterans say, 9/11 was the game changer. Here, I'm not going to go into argue about whether it was a series of terrorist attacks or not. I'm not going to get in there. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to talk about another shift that has taken place recently. And this shift is from West versus Middle East to US/NATO versus China and Russia. Okay? Based on what I've learned from Matt Ho's presentation at last year's VFP Speaking Tour via Zoom, I can see a shift from a traditional military budget to a bigger and more visible budget for each branch. For example, having Russia as our enemy, Europe becomes the army's playground. Then our army can ask for more budget for sophisticated tanks and defense systems, right? As for China, and the nearby islands. That could be a big stage for Navy and Marines, so that they can ask for a much bigger budget for the latest aircraft carriers and submarines and amphibious assault ships and some things like that. The Air Force can work for both, and the newly added Space Force has been already providing a lot of information to other forces, other branches, and NATO forces and Ukrainian forces, etc.
That's right.
So by providing a big and clear territory to each branch in this manner, our military men can perform their best and generate glorious stories to leave in U.S. war history, which I didn't think about this aspect, but it is very important for those military men to become hero, right? They want to be heroes. So as you see, the end of the Cold War did not bring us the end of big spending, nor a new era of culture of peace, because the winner took all instead of sharing the prosperity. In other words, yeah. So in other words, the Pentagon and the State Department came up with a new narrative. Can I say? I think so. So since the 1980s and on, there were a series of color revolutions in, especially in Eastern Europe, the former Soviet bloc, right? So, which was kind of a regime change operations that has been revealed in recent years. New pro-US leaders, which means our puppets, changed their constitutions, placed US-made defense systems, and purchased more US weapons, and etc. So you see, we cultivated new clients for our defense industry. I think that's the reality, right?
Let me jump in here.
Sure.
And ask you about Japan's role as U.S. agent in the Asia Pacific. Why does Tokyo government so solidly, consistently support Washington's instructions?
Let's see. That's because the U.S. doesn't want to see any stronger economy threatening the U.S. hegemony in the Far East. Among Japan, North and South Koreas, and China, including Taiwan, in other words, in order to keep them apart, not together, our government wants them to keep them apart. Our government does anything. They do anything by taking advantage of Japan, which is still a vassal state of the United States. Vassal means, Japan is a subordinate of the United States, as long as the US-Japan Security Treaty is above the Japanese Constitution. I didn't know about this fact until I come to this United States, until I got into this kind of peace activism. As a vassal state, under the cover of sovereign nation, Japan's national diet is just a theater show. Real decisions always come from our State Department and the Pentagon, through regular meetings of the U.S.-Japan Joint Committee. I didn't know about this either for a long time. This is a working level discussion table in order to operate the status of forces agreement between the U.S. and Japan since 1960. Even when I was born. So also during the post-World War II era, Japanese industries have developed a very, very close tie with the United States defense industry as parts and technology suppliers. This means that U.S. military fed Japanese economy, right? That's why Tokyo has been being a lapdog of Washington. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did very well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's go to the next question. Could you briefly share your thoughts on the contradictions between Japan's, quote, collective self-defense right within the context of the peaceful Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution. Now, I know this is a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but just help us understand it in kind of a layman's way if you can.
That's heavy duty. Well, Article 9 renounces war, and this fact is a beacon of their pacifist constitution. It's almost a joke by now. The late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was a grandson of the original U.S. puppet, Nobusuke Kishi, who was he was a Class A war criminal. And he was saved by our government by secret deal. And Shinzo Abe, his grandchild, when he became second term of the prime minister, he twisted the interpretation of the Article 9, saying that exercising collective self-defense right does not contradict Article 9. Right? Despite the strong opposition of people across Japan, including legal experts. That's so many lawyers and scholars were against this decision, but his interpretation was forcibly passed by cabinet decision without adequate discussion. Right? This hasty decision making took place in 2015. Okay, 2015. By then, U.S.-based constructions were already going on Jeju Island and Henoko, Okinawa, right? And U.S.-led coup d'etat took place in Odessa, Ukraine in 2014. As you reported locally from there a few years later. I watched that video yesterday, and boy, you said everything years ago. Now look at this, right? So you see 2014, 2015, around that time, things were already moving towards major conflicts in different parts of the world, right? It's already, planned. So this wild political landscape, you cannot ignore the fact between the, the very strong tie between the Abe family and Mitsubishi. What I want to say is, Bruce, many of your viewers must know that Mitsubishi was the manufacturer of Zero Fighter during World War II. So Mitsubishi Heavy Industry has been a parts supplier to Lockheed Martin's F-35. Simultaneously with this political circus over Article 9, Mitsubishi was constructing F-35 assembly factory in Nagoya, Japan. As you can see easily, you can imagine that once the war starts with China, this factory can perform maintenance work for F-35s. So for our government, Article 9 was a big obstacle which had prevented Japan's participation in the American war in Vietnam. This time, our government made it sure through Shinzo Abe that Japan's self-defense forces will work as our pawns in our proxy war with China, like Ukraine with Russia. That's how I see what I see in the current picture based on a historic flow of the story.
Good, thank you. Recently, several NATO nations had their military ships docked at the U.S. Yokosuka naval base in Japan without a status of forces agreement. So is NATO expanding its military reach into the Asia Pacific, North Atlantic Treaty Organization? What is it doing in the Asia Pacific? And how is this being received by the Japanese people?
Right, it sounds like a total oxymoron, right? NATO in Pacific Ocean?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense at all. But this is a very disturbing issue. local peace activists have been spreading words on this matter via SNS and also Zoom events, and they actually go to in front of the U.S. naval base quite often and do some protesting. But even so, Japanese mainstream media ignore them. In contrast, when North Korea launches missiles passing way above Japan's national airspace, which is a common airspace for any nation, they even interrupt TV and radio programs, alarming people of this danger, which is nothing serious at all, right? Now, let's look at the Yokosuka port. When any nation's military vessels dock at Yokosuka port, which is Japan's territory, and without SOFA, State of Forces Agreement, that is a violation of Japan's sovereignty, right? But where is the press when this happens? It's so sad. So please, this is what's going on. Why are they doing it? I think they're accumulating facts to lead into the future military preparation. In order to talk about that, please allow me to add another important issue here, okay? Which is the regularly performed joint military exercising among Japan, South Korea, Five Eyes states, and NATO states, and other little nations in the Pacific Ocean. Like the Ukrainian military, they have been receiving NATO standard training in order to gain interoperability with NATO forces. Vast majority of Japanese people are not aware of these facts due to self-censoring mainstream media. As you see in Ukraine, the US offers training and weapons, but we don't send official US military troops, right? In case of war against China, I can tell that our government expects sons and daughters of yellow people to kill yellow people. So when Japanese soldiers start dying off, then maybe our government will send, contractors, not the official soldiers. That's what I see. Yeah.
Mercenaries.
Mercenaries, that's the word. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the media. You mentioned it a little bit, how they interrupt TV shows in order to frighten people about North Korea testing its missiles, which the United States and its allies do all the time. But how does the corporate media control of the foreign policy narrative inside of Japan impact the people of Japan and other nations throughout the Asia Pacific?
Well, I think that kind of media control creates more sheeple. Sheeple means sheep and people, right? Which means those who do not think critically, who do not analyze potential risks by ignoring these issues. Instead, they are fed with negative impressions of their neighboring countries. And this is a kind of a tactics to keep them apart, like I said before. I have visited China, though, several times by now already. And the impression that I received locally is totally different from what media are trying to feed us. For example, Chinese people looked much more relaxed and having fun of regular daily life. For example, the women over, let's see, at the age of 55, a woman can already collect pension. Men can do that from 60 years old. Executive level of women can extend up to 60 years old. But, 55, 60 years old, people still young and energetic, so they can easily take a second full-time job. And by that age, they have kind of a rental properties. So I've met several Chinese people who collect their pension, full-time pay, and rent income, right? Also, some of them were also playing a stock market, bonds, and cryptocurrencies too. So that sounds very good for a communist country, and we don't get that kind of information living in this country. Yeah. So yeah, that's the reality of China that our government doesn't want to reveal.
And what do you think the chances are that there is actually going to be a war with China? Is it just that there's really not going to be a war? The United States is just putting a loaded gun to China's head in order to frighten them, to force them to their knees, to force them to be lackeys, vassals of the United States? Or do you think that the United States and NATO now actually do want to go to war with China? What's your real opinion on that?
I think they want to create more opportunities to order more weapons and defense systems to our defense industry. Okay. It doesn't have to be directly linked to actual war, but we have to create more threatening. US and Japan both, we are seasoned. We are trained to react to threatening. That's our lives. Okay, the blue color, yellow, red and green, all that stuff. Do you remember 9/11? Right after 9/11, like that, we were always prone to react to threatening. And interestingly, this kind of story always happened right before the season of passing the Defense Authority Act, right? The big military budget, which is very coincidentally happens. So anyway, I don't think it will likely to happen. And also, China has already long history of being occupied by major European powers. Also, they have an experience of being manipulated with drugs. So I think they're very, very cautious.
Say a little more. I think most people don't know about the Opium Wars. How, excuse me, how Britain forced China to take opium, I think from India, wasn't it?
Right.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, at that time there was a triangle relationship between UK, India, and China. And India, as UK's colony, they were kind of exploited, and they also growing lots of opium. Whereas China, between China and the UK had so much things to purchase from China, but the China didn't have anything to buy from UK. So that's why UK introduced the opium from India in order to control China. And the whole country devastated. And this history will never, never be forgotten by Chinese people. Okay, we should remember that. Who created the drug war?
And so they had two wars. China and Great Britain. They had two wars over this opium that was forced onto them by Great Britain. And I read that at the end of one of the wars, Great Britain won because they were militarily superior at the time. They forced China to pay reparations to Britain for the cost of the war.
Exactly.
Talk about humiliation.
Right. And that's why Hong Kong remained under British occupation for a long time, right?
But we have less than a minute left. You just want to say any concluding thing to the listeners?
Let's see. I'd like to bring to the audience's attention to the fact that the United States do not have two major political parties. What we have here is two sets of 0.5 party. Together, they are one. It's about a time for us to realize that the United States has been a one-party dictatorship sugar-coated with fake democracy, right? So you can compare the other one-party dictatorship, so-called China, like I explained. Think about the prosperity over there and ongoing impoverishment here, and the big gap between do-haves and don't-haves, right?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. We've got to stop now, but I want to thank everyone for watching another edition of Space Alert. We'll be back next month with another interview with another activist from around the world. Until then, good luck to you all, and please get organized.